In September of 2022, a 3-part documentary series was released called House of Hammer, which included the salacious and nefarious details of famous actor Armie Hammer and his recent fall from grace. This documentary not only detailed the sexual depravity, emotional and physical and sexual abuse of Armie Hammer himself, but actually went as far as tracing it all the way up his family tree 4 generations, and it intertwined domestic and global politics, corrupt politicians, and the elites at the very top of the pyramid. In this documentary that was simply meant to expose Armie Hammer specifically, actually exposed how his great-grandfather was intertwined with the most powerful people in the world through backdoor bribes, in certain cases suitcases of money, bribing politicians and prosecutors all the way up to the top of the pyramid, and building a massive oil company called Occidental Petroleum that got away with massive environmental disasters that took more than 100 lives, and even an alleged murder in the family itself. But what's so wild about this story, other than the fact that Armie Hammer is walking the streets free right now, despite overwhelming evidence and witness account of his sexual and emotional and physical abuse, with screenshots and messages to match to prove the receipts. But this documentary details how 4 generations of rich and powerful men physically abused their family, engaged in sexual and abusive acts with children, including their own children, one of whom gave their own account in the documentary, how they used drugs, power, and control to convince 15 to 16-year-old girls, and threats of destroying them to keep them under their power. But what was so wild about this is the tactics employed by Armie Hammer's great-grandfather, Armie Hammer, who would commit illegal acts and acts of bribery with powerful people and politicians, and then audio and video record them to wield that illegal act against them and hold control over them. Yo, does this sound familiar? This seemingly unrelated documentary of the salacious details of a disgusting Hollywood celebrity actually paints quite an interesting cross-section and alludes to a much greater problem where the powerful and elite actors in our world pyramid are in so much control that they're essentially untouchable. This documentary shows Armie Hammer's grandfather in the Oval Office with President Reagan, hobnobbing with Hollywood elites and political elites of the time, and even inviting British royalty like then Prince Charles and Princess Diana stateside to his birthday party. At one point in the documentary, a person had asked Armie Hammer's grandfather why, if he would consider to be president, and the documentary says that he laughed and said, "There's not enough power in it." Through personal accounts that trace this entire family tree through 4 generations, you can see how Armie Hammer, the grandfather of the family, who was the essentially the chairman of Occidental Petroleum, and one of the richest Americans in the country, started out with Russian roots. This documentary goes as far back as tracing his family tree to communism, socialism, and the Soviet bloc, how his grandfather manipulated and controlled women, married into money and then bought Occidental Petroleum, used backdoor deals and bribes to grow the company and its influence, paid off business people, politicians, prosecutors to rise in power, and then how each of the patriarchs of the family, 4 generations down, would control, physically, emotionally, and sexually abuse women, including children and their own children. This documentary is just yet another reminder how the rich and elite class are able to purchase, donate, buy, and contribute their way into staying above the law and above every other member of society. It illustrates how the elite can bribe, steal, abuse, control, and get away with almost anything. And if it weren't for the reckless and brazen DMs and track record and receipts left by Armie Hammer, and then ultimately the strong women who decided to expose him, none of these things would have even come to light. And even though the 3 generations of patriarchs in the family above Armie Hammer, luckily for us, have all since passed away, this family is just one microcosm and representation of what's happening around the world in these elitist families. And isn't it interesting how phone tapping and bribery and blackmail is intertwined with their nefarious political acts and also private acts behind the scenes for them to control and hold power over others and sexually abuse, interestingly enough, again, children. This is happening all over the world right now, including and in real time. And this documentary, like so many others, is just yet another check in the conspiracy theorists were right box. You should really go watch it.